So, hang on. Right. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone this afternoon. This third segment of the 5 workshop series titled Ignite Passion, Deliver Results. So we've got 2 more sessions after this. I hope you will register for them as well and join in. Do follow us on social media. Before we kick off, a couple of house rules. Keep your videos on as much as possible, as I just gave you the justification for it. We will have a Q&A session right after our presentation and discussions are over. Do send in your questions via the chat option available on Zoom, or if you feel comfortable, on the number +94 7722 66622 as a WhatsApp or text options. So ideally, we want to look at a 45-minute discussion and keep 15 minutes for Q&A. But having said that, if you do have the time to stick around post our session for as long as you'd like, we are happy to stay back and answer your questions. There will be a recording of this session and we will have that up on the YouTube channel. So do follow us on our social media for the links. If not, definitely we'll have an email sent out having the links on them. Last week, we discussed what are you waiting for? It's a delectable conversation on taking initiatives. So taking from there, this week, we're taking a closer look at ourselves with the topic, who is in charge of your professional growth? My name is Anton Thayalan. I'm the Chief Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions, the training arm of High Five Consultancy. Joining us today, Vidusha Nathavitharana is the founder and Destiney architect of High Five Consultancy. A bit about Vidusha: he's a seasoned trainer, a consultant with over 15 years of experience, having led HR and HRD initiatives that have won accolades globally. Vidusha has the ability to simplify the complex without diluting it. He has run assignments in over 15 countries globally. And joining him is a beautiful Jennifer Randive, the founder of Focus Direct Management Consultants, also known as the Maverick CEO, based out of Dubai. And Jennifer, for those of you who do not know her, Jennifer has over 30 years of working experience in different industries, from retail to sales, exhibitions, recruitment, headhunting to change management. And today she facilitates people into different approaches to address things differently. She is the coach, the mentor, the counselor, and the consultant, which she uses interchangeably as required. So let's dive in to today's conversation, right? Today we are discussing you. So what have you done lately to upskill yourself professionally? Have you enhanced your toolkit? Have you advanced yourself in education that may complement your profession or your career? Have you, in the very least, read a management book and implemented even one tool within that? And that's what we want to look at. So we've broken this into 5 little segments to make it easy and bite-sized, or to be able to digest, I suppose. Let's look at the first one. So on a personal note, and for a long time, I existed professionally, right? And I was doing well. I worked with an organization for 10 years, and in the same company, I was clearly recognized. I put in my long hours. I was recognized for that. I nailed those promotions. And I was doing well and going with the flow. Now, since leaving that 10-year organization, I took on 3 different roles. But then I realized that's just not what I wanted. It was what I needed to survive, yes, but I certainly wanted more for myself. And that got me thinking. So while we have our 2 wonderful panelists with us, I guess let me start with Vidusha on this. Taking that into consideration, Vidusha, do do people have the innate ability to know what they really want? And does this, or does it stem from a, aha moment, so to speak, and that everything is an enlightenment from there? Your thoughts, please.
Oh dear, put me on the spot there, didn't you? Right. I was hoping Jennifer goes first and I can quietly ease into that conversation based on what she said, but there you go. Right. No, it's an interesting question because I honestly think that most people do know what they want. The issue is that they haven't soul searched enough to find it and bring it to a level of consciousness and a level of acceptance within their own self, right? Having said that, I want to be careful because what we want and what we really want changes with time. Let me give you a small example of that. So I think when I started out, I was very, very clear that I wanted to be at senior management, heading up an HR unit for a global organization. That was very clear in my mind. Or so I thought. And on that journey, you realize that in between from where you started to maybe midpoint of that, you got married, you got yourself a kid, and now priorities change, right? So what you want, I do honestly think, do change over time. However, I think there are some fundamentals that everyone wants. Now, that is the problem. So if you ever ask this question of anybody, just ask the audience here, right? Everybody says, I want to be happy. Everybody says, I want to probably have financial independence. Everybody turns around and says, I want to make a valuable enough contribution. Everybody would say that I want to make a difference, right? Those are common. However, what would make you happy would be quite different to the 10 people, 11 people who are here, and to you and me. What would that contribution be that makes you happy would also differ from person to person. So I generally give 3 simple questions, if you haven't found this out yet, for you to think about it. Now, if you really want to answer that question, you do need to soul search and you do need to introspect. It's not going to just pop inside your head. Aha moments do happen if you're in a crisis. And I think you're wise not to wait for that crisis to happen for you to figure that out, right? Because sometimes that crisis is your deathbed. So you better not wait until then. So here are the 3 questions, right? So if you can answer these 3 questions, where it triangulates, you will find what you really want. So the first is, if you are diagnosed, and I'm sorry, doctor, I know you're an oncologist and I'm not playing on you. This is honestly the question, right? So if you got cancer and you were given 7 days to live and that's it, you're coughing out blood. You've got 3 opinions, all 3 of them confirm. Next Tuesday at 4:48, you will fall dead. How will you spend your last 7 days? Okay. Doom and gloom. I'm sorry to start with it, but this is what happens when Anton throws me under the bus. Right. The second question is, well, it's not related to the first one, but borrowing on from there. Second question is, now you're dead, and whatever faith you belong to, there is a difference between the physical body and your soul, or whatever term you want to use for it, right? And depending on your faith, between 1 to 7 days, your soul hovers around you, right? So imagine your soul looking down on your body and it being cremated or buried. And generally there is the tradition of somebody coming and speaking about you at your funeral. Now imagine that being a speech. What would you want that speech to be like? So write down your own funeral oration and see what you come up with. What would you want said about you on your funeral? Now, those 2 questions aside, please don't get stuck in it. You're not going to die next week, so don't worry about it. But forget those 2. The third question is, someone whom you don't even know bequeathed you with $10 million, right? And you've just got to know about it from the solicitors. How would you spend that 10 million? Now, here's how you figure what it means, right? The first is, if you had just 7 days to live, there are all the things that you would have wanted to do but never quite got around to it. Now you want to do it because you're going to die. That's important to you. What would you want said about you? That's the legacy you want to leave behind, and that's important for you. How would you spend $10 million? Well, that's all the stuff that you want to have, and that's important for you too, right? And you would do it if not for the money. Triangulate those three, you will find out what you really want. And that does shift and change a little bit from time to time, but I think the fundamentals of it, by and large, will remain the same. So if you really want to find out what you really want, you really do need to kind of soul search that way. I'm going to pass it on to Jennifer.
Well, we had an internal agreement with Jennifer, since you joined in late. Therefore, the flip of the coin, you take the first one. But interesting set of questions, and it certainly is soul searching, Vidusha, and I'm not going to argue with that. But I was going to ask you also, but probably I will move this to Jennifer with your thoughts, but also add on, Jennifer, how do we know that this is not really what I want? What
one
as well. So you've seen,
yeah,
the recruitment.
I think it's with a lot of experience, and I love to share my personal experiences, because there's no point talking about someone else. If you have not gone through it yourself, possibly it's something to actually look at. I remember when I was going to shift gear from hardcore recruitment to change management, and I had to ask myself a whole lot of questions. Everything was going smoothly because we tend to become really masters at our trade. Okay, so we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We tweak it a bit, and then we actually see how well it is performing. And you sometimes see that you're really not needed in the business anymore or in the job anymore. And you actually see yourself wanting to do something else and to explore something else. But having said that, it is all about the change and the transformation that you are experiencing within you. So if you see yourself actually getting irritated and frustrated continuously with something that you have been doing or something that you've been working at, you've got to actually stop, and as Vidusha says, actually ask yourself some questions. I think the SLA that I keep talking about, our personal SLA, has to be to stop, to listen, and to ask questions. That is the SLA that I created, especially for 2020, because you never know what is happening and you've got to stop. Don't try and fix something. Please stop and listen to what is going on around you and what's coming up within you. Because those are the only two places that you can actually look at things and try and figure it out. So now, having said that, when I was doing the transitioning, there constantly was stuff that was coming up within me that kept on telling me, okay, now it's time to move. And I was sitting on my, comfort zone. It's like, oh, everything's going smooth, everything's wonderful, till I had to get a kick in my butt. And I got that too. But then when you've been actually asking for something and it's actually showing up, it never ever shows up the way that you think it should, quite honestly. It always will show up in a totally different and weird way. And that's something that we've got to actually be clear and look at it and question it and ask, is this the change I've been asking for showing up in a different way? Because if you actually could ask that question, you'd be surprised what will show up, literally.
Could I just quickly add to that, Anton?
Sure.
You do see, it's a weird thing because it's not an exact science. It's not something that you can put a diary and say, all right, on the 31st of a month, I'm gonna sit down and decide whether this is right for me or not. It's not one of those things, right? You can't. So I think it's important for you to be aware of how you feel, against also what trajectory you've planned out for yourself. And I think that is the important missing link. Most of us generally don't make conscious decisions, very focused, conscious, deliberate decisions about what is it that we want to do. 9 times out of 10, we start on a vocation. It might not necessarily be what we really wanted to do. We just get into a job because we didn't have one. And then we pursue on that path. Then we get married, then we have children, and then we shift gears a little bit here and there, but nothing fundamentally changes. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. To live your entire life like that is also fine if that's what you wanted. The issue is that most of the time, there is something more you want, but you haven't sat back and asked yourself, is this what I really want? So you've just gone with the flow. And beyond a certain point, it becomes very difficult to make that shift for most people because of 3 reasons. The first is that you're financially not independent. You have loans to pay, you have rent to pay, you have school fees to pay, you have all of these financial obstacles that are in front of you. So even if you wanted to, you can't really shift gears and change into something completely different, number one. The second part is, I think we overtly become responsible for other people without allowing them to grow, especially our children, right? We have it fixated in our heads to say that our child must become a doctor or an engineer or something else. And you know, that mental agony is there as well. So that disallows you to shift. And the final piece is what Jennifer referred to, being completely comfortable and damn good at what you do. Now, at least if you are failing in something, then it wakes you up to say, maybe this is not for me. But when you're doing damn well at something, that thought never crosses your mind, because that's the last thing you want to move, because that's the only sanity you have. And that's the only pivot you have that you can leapfrog from. And that's all you know. So you haven't added anything else into your career. That's all you know. That's all you bank on. How would you shift? And people are mortified to change under those circumstances. And rightly so. Because for all of what we speak, if you did make that shift, if you did make that change and you got it wrong, you have a lot to lose. And that's not easy when your children are young. That's not a gamble that many would take, consciously. So when do you know that this is not for me? Okay. And I'm going to say this very respectfully, right? Don't get me wrong on this. I genuinely think if you're doing really, really well, that's the time to quit for 2 reasons.
True.
Right? For 2 reasons. Firstly, you're right at the pinnacle of your career. You really don't want to leave when you have no other option but to leave, right? So you might as well leave when you're on a high, number one. And number 2, if you don't shift then, when you're right at the zenith of your career, well, then you will never shift. And for the rest of your life, it will be that. So when you peak, shift and change, number 1. Number 2, of course, it's a pretty obvious one. If things aren't working out for you, then you have to change, right? Better change, because otherwise you're going to make a right royal miserable experience for yourself. The third one, and this is the interesting one, is if you've done something, you're successful at something, you're not really right at the peak, but there is this little gnawing at you to say, this is not really for you. This is not really for you. This is not really for you. And you don't really listen to it too much. Third is when that little nagging feeling comes, maybe this is not for me. I'm doing well. It's perfectly fine. I know in the next 2 years, I'll probably reach the top, but
why should I rock the boat, kind of a thing?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And the fourth one, and this is what people probably never even think about, is just for the heck of it. And that's a wonderful place to be. You don't really have to change. You're not losing out much either, especially in the early parts of your career. Genuinely, since we are talking about careers here, right? Genuinely, I would tell you, for the heck of it, change and see what happens.
Go for it.
Yeah, because you have nothing to lose, and it's a wonderful place to be. We only realize this later on in life, right? At 22, what have you got to lose? You have nothing to lose. At 23, 24, what have you got to lose? You have nothing to lose. So you might as well shift a few jobs and see what happens, because you can always get a job back or a career back at 25, 26, 27, right up until 19, 30, 32. You're perfectly fine telling people, you know what, I've tried a few things, this hasn't worked, so I'm coming back for a job. I can't really say that at my age. At 45, no one's going to hire me, right? Well, I don't think, at least, not in Sri Lanka anyway.
I will.
Little too little, right? So I think if you remember those four, then you're fine. Then you can make that change.
Well, don't hire him yet, Jennifer. We still have quite a bit to be done here. But
you can second him to me. That's okay.
true. But interesting that you mentioned about quitting at the pinnacle, Vidusha, right? And I go back and take my example, leaving the banking industry after 10 years, right at the top when I decided, I've reached it, thank you very much, I need something else to do. But for many, when you say progression, it's career progression, right? For them, it's either upwards or the paycheck increase, right? And that's the two things that they chase for. So if you're not getting a promotion this year, definitely that 10 to 15% increase. And then obviously the one up. Now, many people don't look at lateral move as a progression. Now, I personally have gone through it, but that's my personal choice. But I guess the question that I want to throw, and I will throw it to both of you, is lateral move considered a career progression, or would you say that is, say, deviating from your goal, your focus? Look at that.
Can I go first, Vidusha? With regard to shifting laterally and probably it would be within another organization if you're trying to shift into another area. If you're not being able to be recognized and you're not enjoying the place that you're working in, I would actually suggest that you actually do that. And I would consider it, that's my personal point of view, would be that if you're not happy with whatever you're doing and you personally enjoy doing it, but you're not being given the tools or the atmosphere or the environment to actually become the best at it, to be able to move to another place, another section, or another company even, I would think would be a great thing for you. It is not even about whether you're going to be recognized for it or not. It's something about you. I keep coming back to the individual all the time because you have to be at your best place that actually will help you be a grander version of yourself. It is not about what other people think, literally. And for the other part of the question is like, if you want to actually shift and move to any place, and if you're looking for something that sort within the organization also, then it's about you making a choice for yourself. No one is going to come and hand something over to you. Are you ready to actually take on that thing and everything that goes with it? Because many people think that, oh, I'm now in a company and now the company has to recognize that they will give me something and I'm waiting for that. No. Things have to shift and change. You don't wait now, you create. You take what it is that you know you're going to be great at. Are you prepared for that? Are you ready for that? Because that honestly is something that I have used personally, and I never ever was waiting for someone to recognize me. Okay? And it comes with the territory. As soon as you take charge of what it is that, in my terminology, will be turns you on, is when you actually get on with everything that actually it makes the change and the difference that you would like to experience. So that's my take on it. Vidusha, all yours.
Sorry, I completely endorse that, completely. I just have a small twist to it, which is, and this is something that was a conversation I had with my daughter pretty recently, so it's still fresh in my mind, right? She's doing a degree in psychology. She left school when she was 16 plus after O-levels because we shifted to Kandy. And all of us, I think herself included, decided that going back to school in a completely new city to a brand new school probably wasn't something that she wanted to do. She will enjoy doing, and that was fine. So she kind of took on this foundation course for a degree program, and now is doing the higher national diploma and waiting for results for it. Now, in the initial stages, she just hated it. I think she still does. The institute sucked. The lecturers weren't great. She had to do certain subjects that she didn't like, and so on and so forth, right? And we had the option of shifting in about, after she had done the first modules, there was the option of actually moving out into a different institute that she loved, and that offered very similar subjects. So they would take the grades of those subjects and, just let her continue the studies. And I sat her down and I told her, look, there is a difference between saying this is not for me and quitting and changing. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. And quitting because it's too much for you, right? You never build resilience and fortitude if you do that, because you can always run away from absolutely anything. You can find a justification for almost anything you do anyway inside your own mind. But the bottom line is you just couldn't stomach it, right? So if you can't get along with the boss, you didn't get that promotion that you deeply wanted, you're frustrated about the fact that you can't navigate the politics, right? Your co-workers really don't get along with you, and you're utterly and absolutely frustrated. Don't quit. Because there are lessons there that you need to learn, especially if you plan on continuing in your chosen vocation for the foreseeable future, and you want to be employed. Being able to wade politics is a skill. Being able to get along with your boss is a skill. Being able to manage conflict is a skill. Being able to stand ground and be able to be absolutely certain in what you want to do and stake that claim for yourself is a skill. If you haven't learned that, maybe the next place you go will be completely different, and it will be a wonderful experience, and people will give you that space and the ability and all of that, and things will work out for you. But you're still inadequate in your skill set. Imagine what happens if that wonderfully rosy place all of a sudden turns topsy-turvy and a new management comes in and it goes back to what you used to be. You're ill-prepared for that. Are you going to quit again? Right? So I told my daughter, you know what? Stick around, see this one through, and see whether you can learn to enjoy it. I often say this, being able to do what you love is a luxury very few people can afford. Okay? But you can learn to love what you do. They're two different mindsets, right? Loving what you do is a choice you make. Doing what you love is a luxury, because sometimes you just can't, and the circumstances you're in might not allow you to choose that path. But you can choose to love what you do on a daily basis. That's one. The second is, Jennifer was absolutely right, okay? You do need to be able, empowerment, I always tell people, empowerment isn't given, it's taken. You want to be empowered? Well, you're empowered already, right? The only issue is that when you start being a rebel, well, you know what happens to rebels, right? If you're successful, you become the president. If you're not, you get shot. And that's true for organizations also. If you put your neck out and turn around and say, you know what, I want to do this, and they turn around and say, no, we don't want you to do it, I'm going to do it anyway. Well, if it succeeds, you'll be celebrated. You make a mess out of it, oh boy, hell's fury is going to come your way.
Yes,
But yeah, and learning to deal with that too is a skill.
Yes.
So I honestly think that you shouldn't really wait for things to be given to you. You shouldn't wait for somebody to kind of instruct you in a certain way. You just need to go out there and just do it anyway. And I often say this tongue in cheek, and please don't hold me accountable for this if you get fired because of what I said. Okay. It is easier to ask for forgiveness than asking for permission anyway. So you might as well do it and see what happens, right? And if it screws up, you just go and put a very, very solemn face and say, I'm really sorry, you know, I promise you I meant good. And being able to apologize well is also a skill that you need to learn. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Anton, thanks for putting that up. Guys, if any of you have any questions, please go ahead and ask.
Absolutely.
We're not talking at you, we're talking to you. And I'd love to be able to, all of us are here to help each other grow. So any questions over there for you? Thank you, Suresh, for being here. I know you're a busy man.
That's
And Pamini too.
thank you, Pamini. That's a valid point. Interesting. Thank you for that comment. I think we need to lead a quality career as compared to a quantity career. Interesting point, and thank you for that. Just interesting what Vidusha said though about bosses and what they want. It kind of moves into the next point in our conversation that I just want to touch on, right? I guess at this point in time, they become stakeholders, right? And I know we touched on this briefly when we did the first session, where we talked about taking the initiatives, talking about showing up at work and what do you do. But when it comes to your career, Vidusha, now, or Jennifer, whether we choose to kind of stay within the organization and do all of that to grow, either vertically or horizontally, or we choose to move into another organization and change careers, regardless, right? I guess the important thing is to be able to identify who your stakeholders are and what is it that they want from you. And I know Vidusha just touched on that a little bit, right? And I guess with the example of Shakya or his daughter being brought into context. But my question is, I guess, just to sort of add context, is what kind of tools can we use, or how can we identify or figure out what is it that our stakeholders want from us? If I want to progress, when I think it also kind of ties in with Pamini's point about quality over quantity in our careers. Who wants to take the first shot so that I don't volunteer you?
Come on, Vidusha, go for it.
No, yeah. So I was about to say that, see, I think we do stakeholder mapping in any business, right? You do identify your key stakeholders. Unfortunately, we don't do enough of that for our personal lives. That's a good place to start, right? So do a stakeholder map. So in any career, obviously your boss is a stakeholder. Your peers are your stakeholders. Your team that reports directly to you are a stakeholder. But the stakeholders that generally don't get identified is your wife or your spouse, right? You imagine if you had to kind of put in the late nights and she didn't like it or he didn't like it, and that's something that you need to contend with. Your children are a stakeholder in this because there is an opportunity cost of time, and they're all very, very real stakeholders. And of course, if you're in a front-ending job, then your customers become a stakeholder, right? And what they think of you become a stakeholder. Now, the issue is that different people want different things from you. And sometimes you can't satisfy all of them. And that's a reality. Now, it now piggybacks on the first question that you asked, right, Anton? What do you really want? Now, if you don't have an answer to that, you have no way of prioritizing your stakeholders. So, I mean, Jennifer and I spoke about this some time ago. On the first session as well, I told that my father was probably one of the most unsuccessful people from a career perspective, right? But he made a very conscious choice. He wanted to be at home at a particular hour, and that was it. So his north point was fixed. Now, whether it was right or wrong can be anybody's opinion, but for him, it was fine. And that's what he wanted, right? Now, it's not what I want though. I wanted a completely different thing. When I was young, I was very clear that I wanted to be rich, and that was it. Now, that's my take on my life. Anybody else can pass judgment on it, including my parents, who vociferously objected to me working longer hours, especially once I got married. But that was my call to make. And that was a conversation I had with my wife before we got married, to say you will have a part husband and a part, if we have kids, a part father, part-time father, part-time husband. That's just the way it's going to be until, certain milestones were reached, because that was important for me. Now, the right and wrong of it, you can debate until the cows come home, but the bottom line is that's the priority list that is for you. So if you know what you really want at that moment in time, making which stakeholder matter most is a very simple choice that you can make. So for me, making sure that my KPIs were met at work was sacrosanct. Nothing was going to come in between that. right? And to a large extent, I still hold that true. So if I take on an assignment, for example, this time right now, right? As far as I'm concerned, I'm at work, and work is sacrosanct for me. There's no bending that, right? So the kids know about it from the morning. I'm in my little den, which is why you see me in this little, space which has absolutely no windows. So it's the quietest place I can find. And I will not be disturbed until I come out of my den. So the rule book is, if I'm inside my den, that means it's something serious. You just need to respect that. And nobody's going to come crashing into my room and say, you know what, I want something, or, hey, Apache, can I talk to you? It's not on right now. Is it fair? Is it not? I don't know the answer to that. But the bottom line is, I do not have the luxury of being able to tell my client, you know what, can you give me 10 minutes? Because I need to just shift out and come back in. In my vocation, that doesn't work. If I'm at work, I'm at work, right? So I think you need to know that priority list for yourself. So your stakeholders are always there. Which ones matter to you is a personal choice you make. Once you've made that choice, though, there are always repercussions, and you must be okay with those repercussions either which way. So as long as you're comfortable understanding that you will always have repercussions, good and bad both, right? Then you're fine. That's a personal choice you need to make. I mean, Jennifer.
And whoever said that life is going to be full of roses, honey?
Absolutely.
If you're actually thinking of that, think again. And if you really want to become something that is out of the ordinary, i.e. extraordinary, you got to actually look at those things. What's important for you? Not what other people tell you, but what is actually important for you. And that's why I like to use the acronym that I created for the word engage, because many people just don't know how to engage with themselves. Because when I have asked so many people this question, I said, so what does engagement mean to you? And it's always an outward trend. I have to engage with my parents, I have to engage with my boss, I have to engage. The question over here is, do you know how to engage with yourself? Or is your engagement with yourself dependent on what other people expect from you?
Absolutely.
So it's more about, can you evaluate? The E stands for, can you evaluate where you are right now? The N stands for, can you note the things that bring the best out from you? The G is about the gaps. Can you look at the gaps that are showing up and really acknowledge them? Are you trying to avoid something? Because every time you try to avoid something, you're creating a void within you, which has to be filled up again with the stuff that you're trying to escape from. Okay. The A comes for, can you ask yourself to be really authentic with yourself? Don't give yourself any BS. Really be honest with you. There's no point in trying to, oh my God, I am like this, and oh my God. No, get real. Because if you're not real with yourself, no one else is going to be real with you. You've really actually got to do a lot of introspection, as we keep saying. And it's a combination of things. It's the stakeholder, it's the business, it's the boss, it's the colleague, it's you, it's your family. And it's almost like an art form to be able to synchronize, to be in the symphony of everything that is going to relate. But you do not have to eliminate yourself in the process.
Absolutely.
The idea is to curate yourself to become the best. It's not make you wrong or make them right. It's not about that. It's about you choosing to really look at how it is that you can become comfortable with you. Because if you're that with you, everyone else, funnily enough, really starts looking at you and saying, I wish I could be like this one. This one is like, so cool. I get that all the time. How on earth can you be so cool, calm, and collected? Fall in love with yourself, guys. And it is really about getting to know. It's about becoming aware, like Vidusha said, consciously aware of where you are, what you want, what's stopping you, how to get out of your way. And the G is to guide yourself into conquering all your limitations. What limits you? Is it your limitation? Is it being created by somebody else? Has someone else told you that you can't do it? Do you have a limitation of money? What is it that you can do? Because right at this point, everyone has got a situation with money, or so I hear. But the question over here is, what else can you be and do differently that will generate the money for you? What are your innate abilities and skills? At this particular time, I'm being able to generate even more money because I'm helping people to get unstuck. Now, isn't that weird? How does that work? So each one of us has those abilities and skills. The question is, are we too busy trying to engage with everyone else and eliminating ourselves in the process?
Absolutely.
And the E is, everything is possible when you realize you as the value.
I mean, thank you for that, Jennifer. Deep. And I agree with that. So touching on both what you just mentioned about the engagement perspective and what Vidusha mentioned about understanding what your stakeholders want and being able to sort of work towards and ask the questions. I guess the underlying principle here is a self-assessment. You need to know what you want and what you're willing to do in order to achieve that, right? Interesting comment by Pamini in that, and I thought that was quite nice. Let me bring that up before we move into the last topic. What Pamini brought about is in the whole process of trying to work with our stakeholders, so to speak, we end up trying to please everyone. And I guess I'm guilty of it. I'm sure we've all gone through this. And I was once told by my boss, if you want to please people, sell ice creams. And that will definitely work, but not if you're in the business of servicing customers in the corporate life. And she has an interesting point, which is when we try to please everybody, we do it to such an extent and we get engrossed in it and so highly involved in it that we quite often forget our focus, or we end up diluting that focus. And the inevitable question is, if you could put that amount of energy and effort that you put into pleasing everybody, into doing something that would help you and your career, that would certainly give you better results. And I tend to agree with her on it, but I have a follow-up on that. But any thoughts on that, Jennifer, Vidusha?
I think Pamini has nailed it quite honestly, is that when we keep trying to dilute or evade or try to please, we call those people pleasers. And we go, yes sir, 3 bags full, sir. Well, for how long? Don't you feel sick of yourself? I mean, quite honestly, each one of us have actually had bosses that have rubbed us around the wrong way. I mean, can I have a show of hands that can agree to say I have bosses who really, peeved me to such an extent that I felt like, just walking out of the job?
Yeah.
All of us have. But the question here is, if you know that you're really getting peeved off, what can you be and do differently to enhance you to become way more competent and powerful within you to be able to stand up to that person or even overtake that person?
Ma'am, it's with clients, it's with friends, it's with people you work. I think one tries to please.
But it doesn't work. Does it work?
Yeah.
It doesn't. So pleasing yourself, yes, is a cool thing to do. By really getting to invest in you to become brilliant as you and recognizing the value of you. Yes, Vidusha, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to kind of put a small kind of pause there, right?
Okay.
Amini and Gaurav both, right? You need to be, see, generally we talk in extremes, right? And because of that, sometimes we miss what is in the middle. Now, pleasing someone else doesn't have to always be at the cost of yourself. And that's the beautiful part of it, right? Now, if your agendas are aligned, pleasing someone else is actually within your scope of things to do in the first place. Let me give you an example. I think most of us would be married. I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong. But if we are, making sure that your wife is pleased might be a wrong word to use here, but happy, I think, right? Or at least content, let's put it that way, at least content is important. Would it not? I think it would be, because otherwise it would be a miserable marriage. And right, you must get what you want out of it. You must get what she wants out of it, right? At some point, at least the basics must be met. Otherwise, what have you got, right? So, but marriage is what both of you want, right? You want to perpetuate your marriage, not to end it. Now, if you want to end it, then the way you go about it is different. So work with the end in mind, right? So whatever you do, work with the end in mind. The moment you know what your end is, everything else that you make as a decision becomes dead easy to make because you know what to do. The issue is that we don't know what the end is for ourselves. So we make a decision based on the here and the now. And that snowballs into a lot of other things. So for example, if your boss is peeving you, ask yourself, what do I want out of all of this? Now, if your ambition is to be the next CEO and he becomes a linchpin for you to make that, your ambitions are joined, right? They are not contradicting each other. So find a way of making sure that that relationship is repaired. Find a way of making sure that you actually get what you want, but not at the cost of yourself. So it's important to understand that you have to work in a paradox all the time. I think life is a paradox, a series of paradoxes. There's no one this, one that, right? You need to be both. So you, as much as you need to be able to stand up for yourself and as much as you need to kind of give it back when required, you also must be able to take it. Because sometimes if you really do listen to some of your bosses, and I've had this many occasions, right, where I look back at certain things now and think, that was a damn good thing to have learned, and I just missed it. And we have this with our parents as well, right? Sometimes they tell us profound things that we're not willing to listen to. And we would have been very wise to have listened to them in retrospect, right? So I honestly think that it doesn't have to be contradictory. Making sure that you're passionate about yourself shouldn't be contradictory to that of pleasing your stakeholders. And pleasing your stakeholders should not be at the cost of yourself either. I think if you're wise, you can find a beautiful balance between this. And if you do that, they're all actually trying to help you rather than to kind of destroy you. And that is the wonderful place to be.
Vidusha, if I may chip in, I think you spoke very well. And I feel, given the current pandemic that we have seen, and sometimes you look at it as to why the world kind of failed, why the human race came to absolute standstill. And I'm sure there must have been one virologist who must have gone onto his rooftop and shouted his lungs out by saying, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. And I'm sure the great leaders in power must have not taken it seriously. As a result, I think in all aspects, when you actually analyze what has happened over the world and why the best of the developed nations couldn't handle it, let alone the underdeveloped or developing nations. And you see that as to what went wrong, where the leadership has actually failed, why we could not see this coming and why we could not, we were not aware of this. We had plans of going to Mars. We were looking at, doing some other things, maybe great, God knows what kind of weapons we were busy doing it, but we couldn't see this coming. So I feel that, that's what happens when people develop skills to please each another, as opposed to stand for what they truly believe in, and that's what I think personality kicks in. And I have been in the industry for the last 16 years in 7 different countries. And I can tell you that there have been some amazing talents, but also there comes moments where, you see the monotonous thing happening, and you see that how much, how people fear to voice out their opinion because they may lose on to a face value, or maybe they may lose on to some friends, or, quantity career may get disturbed, or because they have some loans that stop them from taking those things. There can be any reasons, but I believe that, personalities always stick out. And yes, we need to strike a balance between, getting what we really want through the management. But at the end of the day, if you really have that thing that actually tells you, no, this is not going right, despite you, having done or having put in your best efforts in bridging up the gaps wherever in the management or at your workplace. But I think that's where you need to take a stand. And if people only could learn that art, the world is a beautiful place to live in. And I feel that personality lacks with best of the developed people. And there are so many bosses, not great leaders anymore.
Can I just quickly throw a small spanner in the
I really
wheel?
want to be wrong.
No.
But that's what I see.
There's nothing right or wrong about it. And that's the beautiful part of it. And I know Jennifer agrees with you. So let me be the voice of dissent here, right? Just to prod your...
Sure.
We always blame political leaders for not seeing the COVID pandemic come through. Okay, let's forget them for a moment. Now, most of us come from a management background. Most of us are aware of pest analysis, SWOT analysis, Porter's 5 forces analysis, competitor analysis, and all other forms of analysis. How many of us can weather 12 months of not getting an income and still be smiling? And the question is, why we do it, right? So forget political leaders for a moment. Why didn't we? The same is true for political leadership also, right? They're just as much as everybody else. Second point I want to make is the fact that when you stand up for yourself, I think it's important to remember. I was told by one of my bosses, some of my bosses have been great, right? Where I've butted heads with them, but I've learned a lot from them, right? One of them told me, it is important to say no. Let me play the flip card of it, right? So you say the issue is that we don't actually stand up for ourselves and really be true to ourselves. Imagine if everybody did this. The world will be chaotic because all of us would like to think that we are right. And nobody wants to give in. And life will be chaos that way. Forget work environments. Take the place where we are loved the most. Imagine parents and kids, where the kid stands up for themselves and turn around and say, that's it, my way. I'm going to do it this way. Parents turn up and say, well, try me. That's going to be disastrous, right? So at some point you need to give in too. And both are important. Standing up for yourself is absolutely important. I think it was Churchill who turned around and said, courage is when to know to stand up. Courage is also knowing when to shut up and sit down, right? And listen. Both are courageous acts. The issue is that most of us actually think that standing up for ourselves is the epitome of courage. It's being able to kind of give in to somebody because that moment required it. And let that moment pass is also wisdom and it's also courage. The final point I want to make in this is that in all of this, when we talk about ourselves and truly standing up for ourselves, right? One of my former bosses turned around and said, if ever you want to kind of say something, and I think this will help you tremendously, right? To achieve what you want, but at the same time, not hurt somebody else in the process. And I think that's important, right? You need to be truthful at all times. You need to be truthful. Absolutely. So you want to tell your boss he sucks? Fantastic. So go and say, you know what? You can also turn it around and say, you suck no? to your face and see what happens and suffer the repercussions. But as much as you're truthful, I think you need to be tactful and be capable of that, right? And you need to be helpful. Now, truthful is about standing up for yourself. Being tactful is being wise enough to understand that some repercussions you don't want to suffer through. And helpful is the humanity in you to understand, maybe, just maybe, they have a valid point in it as well. So if you're criticizing somebody or if you're standing up for yourself, help that person see it too, so that there is harmony. And I think it's important to have that in perspective.
Brilliantly put, Vidusha. Brilliantly put.
I have to agree. Thank you, Pamani, and thanks, Vidusha, for that. Just diving back to something that Jennifer spoke of, which is when you want to engage yourself, you want to develop yourself. And I think that just moves us right into the next area, the last point that we want to cover before we go into the Q&A bit is You know, when you talk about what Pamani just brought out in terms of us wanting to please people, us wanting to progress, and Vidusha explained about we need to pick and choose. Let's look at self-development, right? And when it comes to development, the standard practice is if we are employed, we wait for either HR to send out that note that says, by the way, there's a training that's coming up. Would you like to take part? Or we wait for the standard HR practice, which is, dear manager, we're going to tell us what your staff need. And then your manager says, right, we need training programs. We can go. I can release you. I can't release you. Next month, I can release you. What do you want to go for? Or here are the topics. Which one do you want to attend? Now, all of that is fine. That's another topic for another day. And I guess we can't dive into that right now. And that's a whole system to be rectified. But here is my question. Why is it that on the whole point of self-development and our progress and our career and all of that we speak of, why is it that we don't put in any effort to develop ourselves? What is holding us back from either going up and asking if there are programs or getting yourself nominated, or even going out and picking something up and learning? For example, this particular webinar. And there are tons of these, right? Where all of that is knowledge based. Why is that not happening on a regular basis? What's holding us back? Jennifer, do you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, because most of the time we are waiting for someone else to hand us something. That's what I have experienced. Well, you didn't say I had to do it, but they said, oh, I'm too busy to do it. Oh, I have another meeting that I can't do it, or I can't show up because of this. There's always a because, a because, a because. So the way I look at it is, because it's a because, you actually have to become the cause for not showing up in your own freaking life. It really frustrates me how people will blame the whole world for them not becoming better at what it is they would like to do. First and foremost, do you really know what it is that you'd like to learn and develop? Or you just blasé, just sitting over there and expecting everyone to recognize who you are and what they can actually do for you. Then we complain about not being recognized. And then we go into, well, I didn't receive any training. The training was given to someone else. I mean, have you seen how much of this actually goes on? I've been in the corporate world for a long time to actually look at it and to see how people go on and on and on and on about not being considered for anything. My question here is, and as Anton asked, what the hell are you waiting for? What is it? I mean, do you want to be kicked off and not be recognized? Are you okay with it right now? What is it? Because it's almost like, I mean, I remember me having to go and learn stuff because I wanted to be great in what I was doing, and I was working for somebody. And because they didn't have training and development in the company, because we didn't have budgets for that, I chose to go and do something for myself. But how many of us actually stand up and do that? And seriously, guys, it's about, you cannot complain and experience the pain and yet not know that it's within you to actually go and do something about it. So when you're sick, do you only complain about the pain, or do you actually go and see a doctor? Well, do you? Or do you just sit and complain? So my question over here is, what's stopping you in your own professional growth? Really? And yes, you may have situations, you have circumstances, but again, besides only taking care of everyone else around you, do you think it's time to invest in you? Because if you can't do that as a leader, you will never ever be able to recognize that in anybody else, or actually help them to lead themselves or yourself, or help them to be better people. It has to start with you. You are the most important person on your agenda. I keep saying that all the time. And yes, people may not like you for that. People may think you're selfish, but are you here to please everybody? In my way of thinking, it's hell no. Vidusha.
Absolutely, and couldn't agree with you more. In fact, at the cost of shooting ourselves on the foot in the profession of corporate training, I genuinely think organizations would be lovely if they just stopped training altogether and
Totally.
telling people
What to do.
development is your responsibility. I swear to you, I believe in it. Now, let me break that up, right? Development has multiple angles to it. The first is knowledge. You can easily, even if you don't have any money, most countries have second-hand bookshops. You can walk into a second-hand bookshop and almost pick up absolutely anything you want if you like to own the book. But if you don't, the public library generally has a generous offering of management books that you can just pick up and read. That's free. If you can't do that, if you have access to internet, there are multiple sites that you can actually download books for free.
Yes.
So that's knowledge. So most people focus on the knowledge. When they want to get qualified, they spend a lot of money and get themselves qualified because they want a certificate, but the knowledge component is missed, right? Knowledge is a seeking. Now, the second aspect that lots of people forget is that just because you have knowledge doesn't mean you have skill. Now, skill, unfortunately, is something that you need to invest a little bit of time and energy into. So let me give you a tool for this. I've always believed that all of management, absolutely everything in management can be broken down into three simple things. The first is deep observation. The second is deduction. The third is making a decision and living through its consequences. Management is just that, nothing else. If you really break it up, that's all there is. You need to be able to observe whether something needs improving or there's something going wrong. Based on the facts that are presented to you, need to be able to look at multiple angles of it and be able to make the right deductions. If you don't, then well, the answers you find are going to be wrong. And then finally, you need to be able to make the right decisions. And for that, the information that you had when it comes to your deductions come into play. And you need to be able to live with the consequences of the decisions you make. If you can do these things, three things, you are managing your life, you're managing your relationships, you're managing your organization, you're managing absolutely everything. Everything of management is just that, right? So the second part, the first part of observation, you can't really learn in a book. So invest some time. I'll give you one simple thing to do, right? When you go back to work or wherever you are, just observe people. Just do that, okay? Make observations of how people act and react. Then make deductions about what they will do next. Okay? And the decision you need to make is, how will you interject into that? Now try this at a meeting next time, okay? Deeply observe how people actually act and react. Make a deduction about what they're gonna do and see what you need to do in order to make sure that the conversation steers in the right direction. Now, if you can do this and you're quietly doing this inside your own head, you're developing yourself. You've never went for any program. You've never done anything from an academic perspective, but that's all there is, right? So that's the second part of it. That's skill development. The third that you need to develop yourself in is being able to take yourself into discomfort. That's the difficult part. So knowledge you can gain by reading books. Skills you can gain by observation and deduction and making decisions. The third part, if you really want career growth, and I'm talking about it from the perspective of career growth, right, is being able to put yourself through discomfort over long periods of time, consistently, until you achieve the end that you want. Now, if you practice that willingly, where you willingly put yourself through discomfort, and the only example I can throw at you, which all of you can relate to, is sports practices. I don't think anyone goes through sports practices joyfully, unless you're sick in the head, right? Right, where you're physically drained and you're dripping with sweat and you're told to do another 50 sit-ups or push-ups. I don't think anyone enjoys that, right? Nobody enjoys it. But you're willing to put yourself through that because you understand that on the other side is a fitter human being and you'll be able to play your sport at a different level. So find those discomforting factors inside your organizational setting and willingly put yourself through it. If you do these three things, you will develop yourself. You don't need to go for any program whatsoever. And I think you'll be better for it. So honestly, it is in your own hands. I couldn't agree with Jennifer more. It really is. You don't need money. You don't need anything. You just need to be able to understand that it's important enough for you.
Thanks.
And I think it would be a cool thing also to acknowledge the fact that sometimes you may not have what it takes. And then you can pick up the phone and actually have a chat to others and say, right, you know what?
Absolutely.
I'm actually thinking of this, I'm stuck over here.
Absolutely.
Because we don't communicate, because we think that there's something wrong with us. And so if we actually reach out to anybody, they will have an interesting judgment about us.
No, thank you for adding that, Jennifer. I think it's important to be able to ask for help.
SLA.
Absolutely. Sorry, but I think you've both tapped on to, and I'm mindful of the time. So just to wrap up, and already we've covered the last point, and this is what it is at the end of the day, right? You are developing yourself to become a niche. And then you're constantly developing yourself so that there is no way that you can become a niche within a talent pool at one point and expect to remain that forever.
True.
Environment changes, technology changes, conditions change, situations change. So if you go from being a niche to being in the rut, and if you want to just leapfrog, and I guess exactly what Vidusha and Jennifer just brought out, which is not only do you kick off on the journey to self-develop in the n number of ways you could do that, but you got to keep continuously doing that in order to ensure that you're always there above. Otherwise, we're going nowhere with it. But on that note, and I'm going to head, if a quick last word from Jennifer and Vidusha, or thoughts from Jennifer and Vidusha before we move into the Q&A. And I am very conscious of the time. And I do apologize for having taken a little bit more than what we had anticipated, but I'd like to spend some time on the Q&As with everyone. So Vidusha, Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on the topic, or shall we move into Q&A and then work it along?
I have just one tiny question, that's all. And the tiny question will be this for everyone. Do you stop breathing? The second question is, I love everyone shaking their head, thank you. But the question is, why would you stop learning? That's all I have to say.
You can't top that, so I'm going to keep quiet.
Well, thank you. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I know when we mentioned, where look and observe, and I quickly saw Gaurav turning and looking for people in the coffee shop. Were you trying to grab hold of someone, come here, observe you, or was it just a...
Nah, it was just some people moving around.
But here is your chance to ask us questions, or ask Vidusha, Jennifer questions on the topic that we looked at today, because you are the owner of yourself. You are the owner of your brand. So therefore, as with every other person, service and organization in the world, it is in your best interest to make sure that you are constantly updated and constantly up there, serving the purpose for which it is created, and whatever your purpose is. So what questions do you have, or even thoughts for that? And I'm opening this up to everyone in the audience. Anyone wants to take a go? My God, you guys are too nice. Go on, put Jennifer and Vidusha on the spot.
May I? I think me again. I think I'm the most chatty person here today.
Love it. I love it. I love it.
All right. I mean, a simple question. I think people often, confine their ideology of success to only the, parameters of career. I think, do you think that it should be extended and taken into the grounds of life as well, as to when you call yourself successful in career, it got to sync with your philosophy of life, as to how successful you are in life, not just career. And there has to be some sort of a balance, perhaps like work-life balance, your any society, in any charity work that you're indulging in, or do you write books to, like out of your work zone? Do you do anything else to empower others, or are you committed to any sort of a cause? So how do you define a successful person? Is it just limited to career?
Vidusha?
Well, I'm gonna put my foot in it and say there is no work-life balance. It's a myth. It's something that we all coined, I think, to make some money out of doing something.
But why is considered staying late at work a virtue? It's like, why do we have to say that, we can't strike a balance? Shouldn't we be striking a balance? Because you're jeopardizing it.
Sorry.
You have to strike a balance. You just said you can't please everyone. If I'm busy pleasing people at work, then I end up screwing my home life, I got to keep my husband happy, my children happy. I have to make sure my nanny is doing a good job, and for that matter, women are very good at it, right, Jenny?
Hell yeah.
So let me finish that sentence. I love the comeback, right? There is no balance. It's all about what you want. Okay. There's absolutely nothing called balance. So if you are getting what you want, let's cut to the chase. What is success? You getting what you want. That's it, no? Ultimately.
Yes.
Right. So if what you want is to be CEO, to hell with the rest, well, that's your success. But if you want to be a good father, and that's your measurement of success, what it was for my dad, that's his success. But the issue is this, right? There is no balancing act in this. You got to make choices. And that's the issue. We don't make those choices. We are trying here. You constantly refer to pleasing other people, right? Forget pleasing other people. You're trying to please your own self by saying, but at least I did this, no. But at least I spent 1 hour with my son, no. But at least I went and saw my parents once a month, no. That's pleasing yourself with bullshit. Because you didn't want to make that hard choice of saying, you know what? My career isn't important to me. What matters to me is that I am with my parents in their last moments of their life, and I'm going to spend that time. Make that choice at the cost of your career. There's always something that it is going to be at the cost of, and you need to accept that. So like you said, if you put in long hours at work, maybe your wife, maybe your husband will be disgruntled. But once again, if you knew that is what you want, you will have conversations with your spouse to say, please give me that space, because it is a partnership and it's not forever. Give me that time so that I can actually work late and achieve what I want, because ultimately what I want to achieve will impact you as well. Now, people like yourself, right, who are probably blessed in many ways than most people on the planet, have the ability to make that even question. Don't forget the countless others who don't have the choice, right? Are they wrong in doing that? Of course not. I think they're perfectly fine doing it, because it is important to have financial success, whether we want to accept it or not. Once you achieve it, whether you still want to go behind that 1 million more and the 2 million more and the 5 million more incessantly, now that's a different conversation. But for the man on the street, which is where I come from, right? To actually ask that question is even not a question to ask. It's a given, right? So my honest answer to you is this: there are no balancers in life. You only have life. There's no work-life balance, this, that, and other balance. There's no balancing act. There's only life. And in that life, you have choices to make. And if you knew what you wanted, making those choices becomes very clear. When you don't know what you want, then the choices become marred. That's when you try and do a balancing act. So my genuine advice to you is, first figure out what is exactly that you want. No holds barred, honest conversation with yourself. You don't need to apologize for anybody else. If you knew what you want, you'll make the choice. It's a very simple choice to make, right? So case in point, I worked really hard for 15 years. I sat down with my wife, having met certain objectives that I wanted to achieve. And I asked her, you know what, I told you I'll be only a part-time husband. I think we are out of the woods now financially. How many days do you want me to stay at home? And you know what she turned around and said?
Please go to work.
Yeah, please continue to work. Because if you're at home, you make a mess out of everything. 2 to 3 days at home will be nice. The rest of the 4 days, please go to work, which is what I do now. If she told me to wait at home for all 7 days, I think I would have stayed, but I don't think she wants me all 7 days. And my kids actually came up and now told the mother, can you make that 1 or 2 days, because at least then we are under scrutiny only for 2 days, but I think it's a very personal choice, honestly. But the predominant word is that, Pamini, it's a choice. It's not a balancing act. It's a choice you make.
Very true. And just to add to that, Pamini, it's more about what if we were to assess situations and be present in the moment?
Absolutely.
What requires our attention now?
Absolutely.
And give everything that we have in the present moment, in the now, to be brilliant at whatever it is that we're taking care of. And as far as relationships goes, I think choosing a partner is a it's like an art form, literally. And it is more about when you are coming together to actually create whatever, it's like, does the person really recognize you? Does the person really allow you to be you? Because the reason they fell in love with you is because you were being you at that time. So if they suddenly change and try and become something else, and the demanding husband or wife, for that matter, then was it the right choice? And actually choice, as I keep saying, change is constant, but changing is a personal choice. And we've got to be able to change on a dime. And the essential part is it happens only when you recognize that this is something right now that needs my attention. So wherever your attention goes is where your energy will flow. So give that, whatever it is that requires your energy and attention, to become the most important thing on your agenda.
Right. On that,
and forget about everything else. Not important.
Thank you, Jennifer. Just on that note, I'm very conscious and mindful of everyone's time. So wrap this up. But for those who would like to stick for Q&As, please feel free to stay put right after we complete this formality so that we can answer and discuss a little bit more. So once again, thank you very much, Vidusha and Jennifer. Words of wisdom, for that insight and for deep diving into this particular topic. It does mean a lot to us. So for those who've joined in, this session was brought to you by Direct Management Consultants and Versatile Consultancy in partnership with High Five Consultancy, Luminary Learning Solutions. Now, next week, we do have an interesting, and we are covering getting engaged, not just results. So if you are keen, do check our social media pages. We will have the links to the event. It is happening on next Tuesday. Also receive an email address, the video for today's session in case you've missed parts of it, as well as the link to the next session. Once again, it's getting engagement and commitment and not just results. So once again, thank you very much for your participation, for your thoughts, for your comments, for your questions. And on that note, we say thank you very much. Have a great evening. Stay safe. Stay productive.
Thanks, Suresh, Bindu, and Hannah.